You are listening to the SDSU Football Podcast, presented by the East Village Times, with your hosts Andre Hagverdian and Paul Garrison. Welcome, listeners, to another episode of the SDSU Football Podcast. I am your host, Andre Hagverdian, and joined by Paul Garrison, my co-host. How you doing, Paul?
Great, brother. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm looking forward to getting on a plane and going to Salt Lake City for the first time in my life.
There you go. I've had a layover there, but never have done anything further than that. Awesome, man. Yeah. Have you scoped out any of online, like the press box and where all that's at?
I tried to figure out where the press box was. I saw some YouTube videos of tours of the stadium, but I couldn't see any of it. I do have some nice, dinner and beverage spots planned out for Friday night and Saturday brunch. So
there you go.
I'm excited about those. The Aztecs obviously will take on Utah. They're ranked 14th in the AP, 15th in the coaches poll on Saturday night in Salt Lake City. Both teams are 1-1. It'll be a rematch of last year's game. But before we get into that game, let's recap Idaho State. Aztecs got their first victory of the season, 38-7. Looking back on that game, what were your main takeaways, Paul?
My main takeaway is I don't know that I feel like I have a good idea of what this team is anymore from before the game than after it. I mean, they clearly came out with the intention of wanting to get the passing game going, and it just never materialized. And it kind of seemed like they knew they could run the ball, and they knew that at any point they decided to turn that on, that what was going to happen happened. Idaho State's, they competed, they played hard. Their coach was really, really proud of them after the game. But as far as just giving any sort of benchmark or idea of where the Aztecs are, I just don't think it's happened yet. What are some of your thoughts?
Giving up a 75-yard touchdown on the second play of the game was here we go again. Obviously, we figured that they would turn that around. It's hard to tell who this team is because even though the defense didn't give up any points the rest of the game, they knocked out the quarterback. The backup came in. They did give up some yardage.
Two goal line stands.
I was going to say they had to hold them to two 4th and goals. One of them was a touchdown that got reversed, obviously, due to a replay. But it's hard to say when you play an FCS team. I mean, I know some FCS teams beat some, FBS teams this weekend.
Weber State
over Utah State, right?
Right. And it was a real close game, too.
Yeah,
35-7. Yeah.
So, it's hard to. But this is an FCS team that only won one game last year in Idaho State.
Correct. Weber State's right.
And so it is tough to say. I mean, my main takeaways, I think, were 380 rushing yards. Even Chance Bell, the starter, the de facto starter, gets an arm injury and comes out and they don't miss a beat. 380 yards is a lot, no matter if you're Air Force that runs it every play or what. So that's impressive. The special teams was ridiculous. The punt return for a touchdown, the 5 punts down and down inside the 7, and a fake punt for Jack Browning, 26-yarder. What did I text you after that fake punt?
You said is it embarrassing to have to use a fake punt when you're a 37-point favorite? And I was with you all the way up until the press conference when Coach Hoke explained exactly how the genesis of that play. I mean, that happens maybe twice in a career where you get the best of the other side so decisively and so completely. And then, the work that would have to go into watching all of the Arizona, for anybody who happened to not read our articles, other articles that have been out about it, Coach Deacon found the tendency from when Charlie Rangel was the special teams coach for the Cal, and then before that for Arizona, went back, saw all their punts and said, listen, if they line up like this, it's going to be open. And it was exactly the way that he said it was. So I was with you. I thought it was a great point. And then I heard about all that went in there and I went, oh no, that's coaching. And you got to be able to reward that, because every other team that plays San Diego State from here on out, they're going to be looking at their special teams and those kind of tendencies because they know that Deacon's going to be watching.
That's a fair point. I think Coach even said it was something we needed for momentum at the time. I think they were up 14-7 in the second quarter. So, or actually it was the last play of the first quarter.
Right. So, and then I think the next play, that's when Jordan Bird scored the touchdown that put him up 14-7. Yeah. No, it's tough to say like exactly. I agree. The things that still stand out to me as far as the passing game is concerned, when they had one really, really good series where you finally saw everything that we had seen in practice from Braxton Burmeister, which was that accuracy, right? Where he was putting it into the spots where only his receivers could get it. He was throwing people open. He was, doing all the things that a guy who is just under a pro, right? And that's kind of how we have been thinking of him would be able to do. But then you just didn't see against Arizona. You didn't see for most of the game against Idaho State. And so that's still a concern. But what I think changed is those passes came out of the RPO. They came out of, look, we're going to run the ball because they've been running it so well. And it allowed him just kind of, in the press conference that you went to this week, Coach talked about rhythm. And it was in that rhythm of that offense where he finally got it going. And so I think from the passing game perspective, finding ways to allow Braxton Burmeister to get into the game with some play actions, get into some games with the end of the game with some easy throws, before demanding like what they did against Arizona and what they did against Idaho State, for him just to drop back and say, let's go. So I think that was kind of the biggest takeaway from the passing game.
I wanted to talk about defense and Devon Celestine. Against Arizona, we saw Jacob Cowing kind of dominate that slot position role, and Cedarius Barfield.
That's kind.
And, and Cedarius Barfield was matched up against him because he plays that field warrior role. And, Coach Hogue said after the post-game press conference, when I asked him about, did they try to do anything different? What did he think about the coverage? And he tried to downplay Barfield, mentioned that it's, the entire defense didn't do what they're supposed to do. And that's a fair assessment. But then,
hold on, let me interject. He also said, I have to watch the tape first.
That's true. That's
so he said I can't pin it on Barfield. It's probably all of us. And so keep going because it sounds like they watched the tape and then decided that it was in fact Barfield.
I saw Celestine warming up with the ones in warm up and Barfield with the twos, and I was like, okay, interesting. And then Celestine came out first play of the game on defense at Field Warrior. And so,
yeah, speaking of Tex, when he came out, I go, oh man, look, Celestine's starting. And you're like, hey bro, look at my Twitter timeline, man. It's old news, old news.
I did say old news.
Like, my bad. Okay.
I was actually surprised you didn't text me during warmups, but you may have shown up closer to game time.
I definitely showed up closer to game time. I had all 4 kids in tow. I went to the media gate to be able to get in, and my wife was taking the kids in, and she had never been there before, so she decided to pick the gate that was the longest, which clearly everybody else decided to as well. So I was on the back side of a gate waiting for everybody to come in to then go to our seats and be able to watch the game from there.
Yeah, I mean, he had 9 tackles, he had 2 pass breakups, he played a great game. But something we talked about last week is Idaho State and their slot receivers are not Jacob Cowing. And so while it was great to see Celestine play well and bring that energy and really get the defense going, you wonder whether if Barfield was out there, whether he would still have the same success because he was not going up against Jacob Cowing, right? And so it'll be interesting to see how, we expect Celestine to start again this week. But, there'll be times where Barfield will have to come back in and play, whether it's this week, it's next week, or sometime during the season. So you want to make sure that his confidence is still up, that he's still staying engaged and the coaches still believe in him because he's going to be needed again this year.
I think that's a great point. And to talk about Celestine and say, hey, he's playing Idaho State, it's just to raise the question, right? I mean, you can only play the people that are in front of you. If you want to draw a comparison, when Braxton Burmeister scrambled against Arizona, the speed of that defense was able to collapse on him and hold them to shorter gains. Yeah. very similar kind of scrambles against Idaho State go for 60. And sometimes those one extra steps, one of those 4th and goal plays, watching the game again from home, after later in the week, John Schaefer, who was on the call with J.R. Tolver for the Mountain West Network, he was like, that should have been caught. And it was a really well thrown ball. It was a very, very difficult catch. Celestine was right there, but it could have been caught, and that might be a play that a better receiver gets. But at the same time, if you're going to work somebody into a game to try to say, what do you have for the future and of that position? What a perfect game to be able to do it. There's nothing that you can do to take away from the fact that a guy who's a walk-on, right? He came out into the press conference, and it's just the normal questions. And I'm like, hey man, can you reflect a little bit? I mean, this is a huge deal. I mean, you bet on yourself 4 years ago, right? And then the story comes out that he's going to go to junior college. And then his mom was like, I will support you, go. And he goes, and then he gets to this moment, the second game in Snapdragon Stadium, and he's a starter. The team, obviously our EVT awards, gave him like the defensive player of the game. And I think it's just a great, great story that in my mind, that is the main part, and everything else pales in comparison and what it means in the future and all that kind of stuff. But I think if you're Utah, whether it's Barfield, whether it's Celestine, Arizona, Idaho State found success from that slot position. Until the Aztecs can prove that they can stop it, that's where teams are going to try to attack them, and they should.
One final kind of thing about this game was about Snapdragon Stadium. Obviously a night game this time, lighter temperatures. The atmosphere was great. I loved kind of the light show, the flashing strobe lights when they scored touchdowns. That was a cool feel. The firework at the end. Looking forward to, more games at Snapdragon, obviously, that aren't 110 degrees. I don't want to say at 12:30 because
I would say don't say 12:30.
Looks like there's another game coming up at 12:30. Although, fortunately or unfortunately, I will be missing that game due to a family commitment. But definitely will be watching.
Well, I want to give one final thought.
Yeah,
Mountain West announced that their commissioner is going to be stepping down, and I'm wondering if that change will allow the conference to start appreciating punters a little bit more. Jack Browning had what some people who like track punting, the best punting day of any punter in like the last 4 years. And a guy who made 4 field goals in a game that his team won by 24 points was the person who won it from Wyoming, which, don't get me wrong, making 4 field goals is great. Kudos. But it wasn't even close to being able to have the best punting day. So maybe with a new commissioner, the Mountain West Conference will begin to like punters and respect them more, because it took a very, very long time for them to, recognize State's punter from a year ago. And, so it's just an interesting dynamic. But Jack Browning got absolutely robbed. The fact that he was not the conference player of the special teams player of the week is just absolutely crazy.
Yeah, and the 4 field goals, none of them were longer than 41 yards. Right?
Yeah,
and
it's inexcusable.
If you don't give it to Browning, how do you not give it to someone like Jordan Bird, who actually returned a punt for a touchdown, like a touchdown, not a 41 or 23-yard field goal? Yeah, that was a big topic of discussion amongst the media when we were waiting for Coach Hope to come out for the press conference on Tuesday. Yeah. That was a big topic among the media relations and the media guys. Like,
WTF. Yeah, completely bizarre. I mean, the guy who I thought could had a shot to be able to even compete with Browning there's a returner from New Mexico, and he had some just like 60 yards of return or some amazing number. But yeah, it was just out of left field and strange. And like I said, maybe with the new commissioner, they'll find a new way to figure out those awards, because it just didn't make any sense.
So let's turn the page to Utah. Before we get Paul's take on this game, I had a chance to catch up with Nick Bartlett from Super West Sports. They're a online publication that covers West Coast sports and particularly the Pac-12. So I had a chance to catch up with him, get his thoughts. So check that out. We want to welcome Nick Bartlett to the SDSU Football Podcast. He is a senior writer for Super West Sports. How's it going today, Nick?
It's going pretty good, Andre. Thank you for having me on.
Can you, before we get started, can you tell us a little bit about Super West Sports and your involvement with them and how that's come about?
Yeah, so definitely. Essentially, Super West Sports was a Pac-12 centered website. We really focused in on Pac-12 football, and this was about 2 or 3 years ago when I hopped on. It may have been started up a little bit sooner. I'm not sure on the exact details on that. And over the past 3 years, we've expanded to covering some teams here in the Mountain West, the NFL. I'm just grateful for the growth. Honestly, it's been cool to see, and because it feels a little different from when I first started. So I'm just really grateful to be a part of it. But I'd say right now, the majority of our focus is, you know how it is, just so we're on the same page, probably college football. But again, we do cover West Coast NFL teams as well as other West Coast sports. But you can look into that yourself.
Nice. And are you based in the Pacific Northwest?
Yeah, I'm based in Seattle, really Shoreline, which is North Seattle, but Seattle for everyone out there.
Awesome. So we connected earlier in the preseason. You asked for me to do like a primer on San Diego State because they were going to be playing 2 Pac-12 teams. We put out an article. It was kind of like a Q&A, and then we talked about getting together for like a preview episode for one of the games. We weren't able to do it for Arizona, but with Utah coming up, it was a great chance for us to reconnect and talk a little bit about Utah and that matchup.
It's just such a kind of crazy matchup after last year and seeing what may happen. But I'll let you touch up more on the details of that.
Last year's game was a very interesting, kind of up and down game. It was tied at halftime. Both teams scored touchdowns in the first half on special teams. San Diego State scored 2 quick touchdowns in the first 5 minutes of the third quarter. Pretty much looked like they had the game, sewn up. Utah switches quarterback from Charlie Brewer to Cam Rising. He brings them back, ties it up, triple overtime. Aztecs end up winning on a 2-point conversion. What stands out to you from that game?
I mean, just everything. It was probably one of the most interesting football games, really, just in terms of a variety of dynamics. Obviously, you have the beginning of Cam Rising, if you're a Pac-12 fan out there, and what he did. But just if you go into the particular game, I mean, San Diego State, this is one thing that may get overlooked. San Diego State had a lot of chances to win that game in regulation, and I think they could have put it away, regardless of whether like Charlie Brewer was in or out or Cam Rising came in. They had opportunities. I mean, wasn't it a missed field goal could have put them up 27-10? They had a fumble. Didn't like a running back like lose it off like his own player or something? So those two. Yeah, so those two opportunities. They could have put like the game away literally right then and there. You're at home, and I think obviously I've done a tiny bit of research. I'm never going to claim to be expert on San Diego State. This is a winning program, so you would expect them to win that game at home, plain and simple. So I think that's what's get lost. Excuse me, is they really were the better team. Obviously, putting in Cam Rising changed things a bit. They should have put the game away, but then you do have to take away really just, the fortitude to win after all that. To win after really screwing it up, most teams would fold, especially against a team like Utah, because Utah's physical. Utah's brutal. They wear on you. So you're going to 3 overtimes, and then you run a freaking trick play. Even the last play of the game, that was like 2 inches from being a catch and going to like a 4th overtime. So just, you got to give it to the heart of San Diego State for not folding, because most teams would against Utah. They would have just gotten ran over. The defensive line would have freaking killed everyone, and that would have been that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The San Diego State's offense basically stopped after they went up 24-10. I think it was primarily just run, and punt. They did have that missed field goal that would have put them up 17. They had many chances to put that game away, but unfortunately, they were able to come away with the victory in overtime. This year, both teams are 1-1. Utah lost a close game to Florida and beat up on Southern Utah 73-7. And obviously San Diego State lost to Arizona in their opening matchup, and then beat Idaho State. Are you as surprised as I was that the betting line was 21 points in for this one?
Yes and no. I think it is maybe a little much. Actually, no, I'm going to say no. I'm just going to give you a clear answer. I hate when people say yes or no. I'm going to say no because of the situation we just explained. Utah remembers what happened last year. And Utah doesn't get beat like that very often, no matter how like crappy that, I mean, yeah, he was crappy, no matter how crappy Charlie Brewer was. And they're going to remember that. They're going to remember that. They're a mean team. And on top of that, they did just lose to Florida. I mean, they're pissed. And I'm sure we'll get into the details, obviously, of their roster in a second here. But, I mean, this is a pissed off team. So I wouldn't want to see that Utah team. I understand why it's 21. And also you have to take into account San Diego State's performance against Arizona. They did get beat pretty solidly, but at the same time, you do have to take into account for I coach youth basketball. That first game of the year, I think plain and simple, they got surprised. They thought they were going to Arizona last year, maybe a little bit better, but they didn't know they were getting that because Jacob Cowling's probably going to be an all Pac-12 receiver, so.
Yeah, Cowling definitely dominated that game with 152 yards, 3 touchdowns, pretty much out of the slot. And that's something definitely that San Diego State's defense has to work on and will work on as the season progresses. So if we get into Utah's offense, obviously you mentioned Cam Rising from the matchup last year. He comes in as a full-time starter. He obviously took over last year after the San Diego State game and took them all the way to a Pac-12 championship. The one way he killed San Diego State towards the end of that game last year was his ability to roll out and find guys downfield, buying time. Is that his strength? And what else, should we be looking out for him?
The thing that makes him most dangerous is he's a smart quarterback. Plain and simple, he doesn't have it all in terms of, he probably doesn't have the strongest arm in the world, but he's pretty athletic. He can get out of the pocket. He's fast, you'll say, not the fastest guy, but he's just so smart and he understands the game. He's a true Utah quarterback. He fits exactly what Kyle Whittingham's trying to do. They always put pieces around him, they play more NFL style football. We're going to run the ball here, 2nd and 5, maybe get a play action, maybe run the ball one more time. And Cam Rising understands that. You look at a lot of the stat lines, it's something like 200 yards, 2 touchdowns, maybe like 1 crappy interception or something in there. He just understands the game. And that's why I think he's dangerous. Plus he has the beautiful long hair. So that helps as well. I think maybe his teammates, are just just respect that in some way, shape or form. But, seriously, he's so high IQ. I think that gets often lost in the day and age of college football. You get guys if you've ever followed Jacob Eason, who come through just, all the physical attributes in the world, but can't play the game. Throw a screen 700 miles per hour. And Cam Rising is the exact opposite of that. Understands all the intangibles, the little things, and that's what to look out for. If you guys can get an interception, if he throws one, you have to capitalize. It's one of those things.
Yeah, their passing game seems to be very predicated towards the tight ends. They've got Brant Keithy and Dalton Kincaid as a USD transfer. They get a lion's share of the catches. Both of them are really good tight ends. I asked Coach Hoke this earlier today in a press conference about the tight ends, and he was like they're built to be a 12, 13 personnel team and even 14 personnel sometimes. What do you see from those two guys, and how explosive and how dangerous they can be running over the middle of the field?
I think those are two different words. Explosive is not the word I'd use. I don't believe that either of them are explosive by any means necessary, but dangerous they definitely are. I think those are two different things. Brant Keithy he's going to make every little thing right, and he's stronger than every player in the field. He's a true weapon. He's going to run all the routes right. He's going to catch everything. He's fun to watch. He's a weapon. He is an absolute weapon. And Kincaid is just kind of the lesser. I don't want to call it lesser because he's a stud in his own right. He's just not quite Keithy. You know what I mean? But he's just still phenomenal at everything. And I think the thing that often gets lost with him, obviously, Tavion Thomas switching over to running back is a workhorse and, gets a lot of the hype because he scored over 20 touchdowns last year. But when Brant Keithy gets hyped and gets going, this team's really tough. He's just such a beast. And particularly this year, because they lost Britton Covey, like when he gets going, they're just, everything is predicated on that. And it just makes them unstoppable. So I'm really high on Brant Keithy. Again, I think Kincaid's a stud in his own right, but Keithy's, we'll be watching him on Sunday.
Yeah, last year's game, San Diego State did a fairly good job against both of those guys. They did have 10 catches, but only for 67 yards. So they'll have to keep those yardage and those touchdowns down, because I remember last year San Diego State played San Jose State, and they had Derek Deese Jr., who was this big, athletic tight end, and they had all sorts of trouble covering him. So that's going to be definitely something to watch moving forward. You mentioned Tavion Thomas. He's kind of become that lead running back. What are his strengths, and how do they utilize him in the run game?
His strengths are run over you. Better tackle him or get run over. I mean, I think this guy, I don't remember the exact details off the top of my head, but he was like not in college football 2 years ago. Like he was just like a normal guy working, just a job. And I mean, he had 24 touchdowns, or not 24. He had over 20 touchdowns last year. So I think he's very grateful. But in regards to on the field, he's just strong and stronger. His speed, I'd say, is like a little bit above average. Maybe if you want to be nice, a slight tad, maybe like a 6.5, 6.8 out of 10 if you really want to get exact. But he's going to understand all the concepts, run many different plays, block, which is often underrated. Blocking is huge. And again, he just wears on you. Think of like a la no one's Marshawn Lynch, but that type of attack. Maybe you don't get him in the first quarter, the second quarter, the third quarter, but no one wants to tackle this guy after 25 touches. I mean, like the thing, everyone always says that quote, but they don't like really explain it. Like after you've been trying to grab this guy's legs for 20 times, your arms are tired. It's not like you don't want to. It's your arms do not have the same strength. If you've ever worked out, you understand that concept. If you do 100 push-ups, you can't do 100 push-ups again. And so he's going to keep coming at you, keep running at you. And then they have backups too. I mean, Mekhi Bernard's in another backup, which adds a kind of element of speed. So their line's physical, which doesn't help. Obviously, the two tight ends you already mentioned. And just, again, with Tavion Thomas, it's just that workhorse, continuous until basically it breaks your soul.
Moving on to their defense, I saw that they had 3 preseason All Pac-12 first team guys, Cole Bishop and Clark Phillips in the secondary, and Van Fillinger as defensive line. What is their number one strength? And then are there any other guys other than those 3 I mentioned that we should key in on as a disruptor on their defense?
I do want to start off, and I'm going to say one thing about their offense too, and I will answer your question. I'll make it quick. I think their offense, the one thing I do want to say is they don't have any explosive weapons at wideout. I think that's important to add. I think that's the one thing that Utah is missing. San Diego State can keep it close. Utah may not be able to put up points and bunches. So I just want to say that. Hopping over to the defense, though, I think that they lost a lot last year. And it's something that people just want to, say we can just replace. But Utah isn't Alabama. They're not Clemson. They're not Ohio State. And to say they're very elite, they're on that great elite boundary. They're not quite elite yet. So they lost a guy named Devin Lloyd, NFL first rounder, and another player named Nephi Sewell, who is, who's really a complete player. You could even use the word dominant at college level. It showed against Florida. Everyone's talking about how good this defense is, but didn't Florida just lose to Kentucky in week 2? If you look at, I'm pulling up the stat check on my notes. So against the Gators, Utah allowed 283 yards, 4 touchdowns, and gave up 7 yards per carry. And this is Utah. Let me read that again. 283 yards, 4 touchdowns, and 7 yards per carry. So that doesn't strike me as anything to be intimidated by. Southern Utah, obviously, they dominated, but I'm not going to look at the stats for Southern Utah. Come on now. And another thing, this is what I really want to highlight. Anthony Richardson, he had some hype. I was able to talk to a Florida writer. I know he was kind of like touted a little bit down in Florida, but man, he wasn't like freaking top recruit in the nation type, just like no one was expecting that. I think is what I should say. He ran for 3 touchdowns against Utah, 3, the quarterback. So in terms of their defense, I think it's largely unproven. Their secondary is going to be unproven in the front 7. Still should be solid, but unproven. Their secondary is definitely going to be their strength. You mentioned Clark Phillips III, lockdown corner. He's really starting to come into his own, I believe. He may not. Yeah, I'll give him the leader in the defense. He's just a lockdown corner. I still don't think he can lock down a guy if we're going really deep, like a top receiver in the country like Jordan Addison, but he can lock down most. Cole Bishop, just a really stereotypical Utah player, makes all the right plays, really fast, kind of like a quarterback of the defense at the safety position. And just if you make a mistake, he's going to be there and he's going to hurt you. He's going to hit you hard. He's going to, wrap up all those little things. He's a first teamer for a reason. He fits the Utah brand. Van Fillinger is just, no one even knows what position he plays on the line. He just makes plays. He's nasty. And some other names, I think I just want to throw out there. You got cornerback to Travis Broughton. I think that if he can really hold it down, that adds a third dangerous player in the secondary. And that is what would really separate Utah. Because, again, that front seven, through those Florida stats, wasn't that solid. Junior Tafuna, too, but that's a pretty common name.
Yeah, I also noticed R.J. Hubert, just looking at the stats from their first two games, he had a pick six last week, and he had a forced fumble and a fumble recovery return for 47 yards against Florida. So he looks like he could be someone that's around the ball a lot, could be a playmaker for them. So it does look like they've got some strengths there. Moving on to special teams, anything particular about either their punter or place kicker or returners that we should keep an eye on?
Nah, there's really nothing. The kickers are unproven. Punters transfer from Michigan State, nothing really. And they lost Britton Covey in the offseason, which will kind of hurt their return game. As I mentioned, I'm not too hyped on their kind of skill players. Outside Tavion Thomas, they're wide receivers, I should say. So at punt return, they got Devon Bailey, who's kind of their number one receiver, but I wouldn't consider him a threat. So really, not a lot. I'm not going to waste time. There's not a lot there.
Yeah, San Diego State, a continuation from last year, their special teams is a big weapon. Obviously, last year with Matt Ariza and Jordan Bird, but Jordan Bird is back this year, and then the new punter Jack Browning, he punted 6 times last week, and 5 of those were downed inside the 7-yard line, 2 of them at the 1. That weapon to be able to flip the field, down people, back up against their end zone, I think is going to be a huge, huge bonus for San Diego State if they can continue to execute. Because we know Coach Hoke, anyone that's followed San Diego State and Coach Hoke in other spots, it's all about defense, special teams, field position. And I think that's how the recipe for San Diego State to win this game is going to fall along those lines. In the article, in the Q&A I wrote about San Diego State back about a month ago, my prediction for this game was a Utah 24-17 victory. So I'll ask you, Nick, what's your final score prediction?
I got Utah 35-21.
Okay. Any particular thing that you think is going to be kind of set the tone for the game, other than what we've already talked about?
I think that Utah is just really going to be angry. I think that they're going to literally thrash anything in their way. I think that San Diego State's actually a really good team. I think that Utah could be a college football playoff team, though, still. I think that loss to Florida, again, was kind of like San Diego State's loss to Arizona. They didn't really understand exactly what they were getting. And when you get a good team and you're not maybe at your A game, no excuses. Both teams lost. But things can happen at college football. It's the highest level. Outside of that, I'd really just say if the Aztecs can hang with Utah's physicality, again, I expect Utah's physicality to take over. But if the Aztecs can hang, I think that the lack of big play weapons by Utah could really make this game a lot more close than people think. So San Diego State can just hang around and limit big plays, and like you were just saying, play their brand of football, just defense running and keep it close to Utah. Maybe Utah gets some touchdowns, San Diego State gets some field goals, but if you keep it close, I think that I haven't seen Jesse, your star wide receiver, his name's Jesse Matthews, right?
Yeah.
I haven't seen him enough to, make a real judgment. But I feel I've seen Devon Bailey enough, and I see no reason why Jesse Matthews is going to be a bigger playmaker. I just expect I do expect Utah's physicality. That's why I picked them to win 35-21 to take over. But if San Diego State can hang around, this could get really, really interesting like last year.
Yeah, I'm making the trip to Salt Lake City. It's probably the only road game I'm going to go to this year, but I'm looking forward to checking out that stadium and the atmosphere. I've heard and read good things about it. So it should be fun college football Saturday. Nick Bartlett, again, he's a senior writer for Super West Sports. You can find Nick on Twitter at Words by Bartlett, and Super West Sports you can find at Super West Sports. Anything to add before we sign off, Nick?
I think that college football here in the next 2 years could be really interesting. And I mean, the Pac-12 and Mountain West, this could be, we have no idea what's going to happen really. And this should be a lot of fun to watch. There's good teams in both conferences. And I'm really not just, saying that coming on here, just saying that crap. I had the chance to watch BYU take down Baylor without their two top receivers last week. And that was an eye-opener. So I think that we should have a lot of fun. Kind of just all cheer for West Coast football at this point, man. We got to hold the brand. No one takes us seriously. Bottom line, I know maybe in the Mountain West they look up to the Pac-12. Maybe not now, But I mean, no one takes us seriously on the West Coast when it comes to football. So let's cheer for each other and win games. We don't have Alabama. We don't have Ohio State. We don't have a Clemson. So it's time for us to all cheer there on and let's go take this over. Let's go run things.
Absolutely, totally. And you never know, Utah and San Diego State might be in the same conference sometime in the next 2 years. So a lot can change. We're all excited to see how things go. Nick, thanks again for coming on. Definitely appreciate your insight on Utah, and let's do this again next time.
Awesome. Yeah, sounds good. Thank you for your time as well,
Andre, that was a great interview, man. Thanks for holding that down, being able to get those thoughts. I mean, the way that your relationship, how you guys met, and all the different parts of it, man. I think that just makes everything better. Anything about this upcoming game that you are paying attention to as you're thinking about Utah?
You can't not talk about their tight ends, Utah's tight ends. They've got extremely talented tight ends. Two guys, Brant Keithy and Dalton Kincaid, who played in last year's game. And the Aztecs actually did a decent job. They got 10 catches, but not for 67 yards, no touchdowns. So they did a really good job against them. They're even more of a focal point on their offense this year, in addition to their running back game. Tavion Thomas, he's almost 240 pounds. He's a big dude. And as Nick said, he's going to run over you if you let him. And so having to stop the run is obviously number one priority for any defense. But those tight ends, I just think back to Derek Deese Jr. last year in that San Jose State game, who just was, even if he wasn't open, he was just going up and getting passes. And the Aztecs are going to need to account for not just one guy, but two guys from that tight end class.
I think that's a great point. The thing that I think makes this game really difficult is I'm not sure that even last year's team, if they had played 10 times, that it would have went the way that it went. First of all, the game it went to overtime, double, triple overtime, but it was not anywhere near as close as the final score indicated. And San Diego State beat up on Utah. And it was one of those weeks where leading up to it, their coach was saying, we didn't get a lot of rushing yards, but it was just kind of a fluke. We always have rushing yards. If you look at the tape, BYU did not beat us up. So they were coming in there kind of like expecting to get back to the same Utah football of running the ball and being physical and all that. So they were ready for San Diego State to do that. And the Aztecs absolutely dominated them. I mean, I have been to very few games on any level where a defensive front dominates an offensive front the way that San Diego State dominated Utah. They did everything they wanted, got penetration when they wanted. There was they suffocated Utah throughout the game. So to expect that kind of game again, I think is kind of, maybe wishful thinking for Aztec fans. And so I think they're going to have to win with a different formula. It definitely always comes down to turnovers and if they're able to get some, but they're going to have to be able to limit the run. I don't see a way that they're going to limit them to 70 yards like they got in last year's game. You almost can throw out last year's game because it was just such a weird performance. And I don't know that the Aztecs have the ability to hold that offense in Salt Lake again to such a low level. But that being said, I think the thing that you want to try to make Utah do offensively is I think you want Cam Rising to have to beat you from the pocket. And if between his running ability, his ability to make big plays because he extends them and gets out of the pocket, or being forced to make quick, accurate throws from the pocket, you're going to pick that one. So I'm curious to see, Kyron White is back, if they're going to decide to use that spy thing that they used for that one play against Arizona. But I think that is I think your game plan offensively. And goes back a little bit to Idaho State. I think one of the concerns is still there is, they didn't have a lot of sustained drives. It was big play after big play after big play that really got them going. And if they have to depend on the big play in order to have their offense succeed, then I think you're going to have to see those from special teams again. I mean, Jordan Bird obviously returned to kick last year, set them up with good field position, score a touchdown, something like that on special teams. But offensively, I don't know where they're going to be able to find big plays in this game. And they haven't yet shown the ability to march down the field and do a bunch of consecutive really, really good plays. So I think that's going to be what I'm, paying attention to is, does San Diego State have the ability to have any sort of sustained drives? And if not, then where do the big plays come from on offense to be able to score enough to get into that 30 range where I think they're going to need to be in order to be competitive in this game?
Yeah, if you look, I agree that last year's game is you can essentially throw it out because the teams are so different. But if you just look at the stats, the Aztecs offense did not have a great day themselves. Lucas Johnson threw for 44 yards total.
I know. It was wild.
Greg Bell had 119 yards on 33 carries, so he didn't have a huge high yards per carry, but he was able to get 3-4 yards at a time. He had 2 short yardage touchdowns. Lucas Johnson did have a 54-yard run that set up the touchdown that they took the lead at the start of the third quarter. And guess what? Florida, Anthony Richardson rushed for over 100 yards as a quarterback against Utah 2 weeks ago. I think obviously the running game is going to be important with the backs, but you could potentially have openings for Burmeister as well to find spots where he can run the ball and get yardage as well. Yeah, last year's game was really up and down because, San Diego State could have easily won that game 27-10, or they could have easily lost that in either of the overtimes. So, Cam Rising coming in and kind of bringing them back from the dead in the last 6 minutes, obviously was, sent the game to overtime, and that started his rise to prominence.
Pun intended or no?
What's that?
Pun intended, or was that an accident?
Rise?
Yeah, rising. Right.
No pun intended.
No pun intended. Sorry. Yeah. A little punny.
It's a whole new year. Utah's a great team. I mean, up and down their offense and defense, they've got Pac-12 first team, second teamers. It's not going to be an easy game by any means, and the Aztecs are going to be at their best, something they have not been close to in 2 games this year.
Right, and I think that's your hope, right? I mean, your hope is that this team is a lot better than it's performed to this point. Defensively, the thing that I'm looking for this upcoming week is I feel like the Aztecs, especially against the run, but I think it extends to the pass as well. They just haven't been great on first down. Or to say it another way, when they've been able to win first down, it's not that other teams haven't been able to win third and long, but the odds just went through the roof. and of San Diego State being able to get off the field. And so I think that's another really, I think, big key to this game is trying to make Utah have to be behind, the down and distance markers and things of that nature. The Aztecs to this point, they've allowed a lot of first down runs for, 5, 6, 7, and then, they win third down or they win second down, but now you have a third and short and you can run or you can pass, or you have to keep everybody really tight. And then the crossing routes come into play and all that kind of stuff. So I think to your point about tight ends, I think that's where those tight ends can flourish as well, and picking up those first downs and just kind of, keeping that methodical movement that Utah's offense likes to do. So I think defensively, that I think to give them their best shot, I think they got to start just doing better on first down. And if they're able to, limit either through incompletions, teams to this point have been throwing the ball very quickly, but San Diego State's linemen have not responded by getting their hands in the passing lanes. And, and that's what's, Justice Tavai is supposed to be the longer, taller brother. And so he's supposed to be able to have a little bit of that. Caden McDonald, he got a tip pass that was almost interception, but they intercepted, but they need more of that. If the teams are going to be throwing the ball quick, get your hands up, know that that's what's going to happen, and try to disrupt it that way. Stopping the run to 1, 2, 3, to where it sets up that 2nd and 7, 2nd and 8. And so I think that defensively that's something the Aztecs have always been good at, and they need to get back to that. They need to get back to being able to win first down, I think, a lot more. And I think what Coach said is true. They have not they were not very good in turnovers against Idaho State. They obviously got 2 against Arizona. And I think they're going to need to get a couple extra possessions, a couple ways of scoring that are unconventional to make this, a contest. The final thing that I would add about Utah, since the summer, I have been told from people who have been in their locker room that they have a calendar and the San Diego State game is circled, that any chance they can to bring up San Diego State, it is one of the most important games to Utah that they have on their schedule. They've been paying attention to it. It's been a source of motivation for their team throughout the offseason. They are looking forward to beating up on the Aztecs because the Aztecs beat up on them. The Aztecs are going to need to match that intensity because this team has been waiting for this game. And I don't know how much Florida deflated them and, their expectations of coming in there as a top 10 team and all that kind of stuff or whatever, but they're going to be amped for this game from what people have been telling me about people, from the fact that they've been talking smack to people about this game, since the summer and even in the spring.
So for you hit on one of my 3 keys to victory already, which was forcing turnovers. I said force at least 2 turnovers. Up until the Arizona game, Aztecs were on a 16-game winning streak when they had forced at least 2 turnovers or more. In this game where offense could struggle to go 80 yards and score a touchdown, you can get a turnover. Maybe the defense returns it for a touchdown or gives you a really short field to have to go score a touchdown. I think that could be crucial. Third down conversions, I would say at least 45%. Coach Hoke said they want to get to 50%, but I think even 45 they'll be happy with. You can't have 3 and outs. They've started both games with multiple 3 and outs. I think Utah allowed 7 of 12 conversions to Florida in their loss to Florida. And I think converting those third downs is going to help you win the time of possession battle, keep the ball away from Utah's offense. Utah's time of possession, I think they're averaging about 34, 35 minutes a game versus 25, 26. So I think that's going to be key. And the third one is hitting one big deep passing play of over 50 yards. Everyone wants their passing game to get better and be balanced. I don't think this is going to be the game where they will. They're not going to come out and start completing 10, 15-yard passes to wide receivers consistently. Utah secondary is too good, and I don't think San Diego State's pass, offense is there yet. But I think there's going to be opportunities in this game where they're going to have guys open down the field, either through busted coverage or a guy falling down, or maybe a play action where the defense goes one way and another player goes another way. And I think they're going to have to hit that one big play score that touchdown because Utah's not going to give them that many opportunities for big plays. So when they get a man open, they're going to have to connect. And I think those are three things they can do in addition to everything else we talked about. They're going to have to play it close to a perfect game to win. It's doable. We've seen other teams go in with bigger underdogs and win. There's no reason San Diego State can't do it, but they're going to have to be at their best.
Perfect. I agree. I mean, I think those are all phenomenal points. We'll say shout out, Andre, to you. I'm sure everybody who is listening takes in your previews for all of the games that and they're second to none. I mean, it's there are other previews that are out there from different people. And I think they try to get them early in the week to get out of the way because they don't want to be on the tracks when the train's coming. Because I mean, there are not NFL teams that have better previews from people around the country than what you're putting out week in and week out. So keep that stuff coming, man. It's just, I mean, it's art, bro. You're killing it.
I appreciate it. I know we talked about this. I felt I was almost trying to cut down some of the previews just because I felt like they were getting too long and maybe didn't need to be too long. And every week so far, I found myself.
You're a machine, bro.
More stuff. And so before we sign off, I do have a question for you that I heard today, and I'm curious to get your thoughts on this.
Okay.
I was listening to John and Jim today. They had Devon Celestine on for an interview, so I definitely wanted to listen to him speak again because we talked to him during the post-game press conference. But afterwards, or maybe it was before the interview, they were asking a question of whether this would be San Diego State's biggest victory of all time if they beat Utah on Saturday.
No.
Ranked team on the road.
No.
Well, what's the biggest victory in San Diego State football history today?
To date, I mean, if you ask old people, they'll tell you that them beating Florida State in the 70s was the biggest one. Did they say biggest non-conference or biggest win overall?
Biggest win overall.
Okay, no, I buy the hype that when you win conference championships, those are bigger and better and more important wins. So I think I would put both of the conference championships, the recent ones, in there. I think the way that they defeated Houston in the Las Vegas Bowl, with Donnell Pumphrey breaking the record and flying around and just looking like unbelievably better after the first quarter than a team that started the season ranked 6th in the country. I think that was a pretty significant one. I think you're going to have to go Stanford with everybody going and storming the field as some other ones. But it absolutely would be significant, kind of showing where the program has gotten to. This game on the Aztec schedule for years and years and years was the one everyone circled, right? It was the big game against the power conference team. And San Diego State would always come so close to winning. There was a fumble on the goal line that if there had been replay, there was replay or something, I don't know, that maybe they would have called it and given San Diego State the touchdown. But nonetheless, they fumbled and then Notre Dame came back and won at the very, very end. And, Missouri and them being up in Hoke's first tenure and them throwing a slant route and somebody just blowing up the defender with a huge clip in the back and the guy runs at 80 yards for a touchdown and they lose, So there's all these kinds of games that have always been there, and they were moral victories. And there's only one outcome that can happen on Saturday where Aztec fans and Aztec Nation and the players themselves are going to feel good about. And that shows, I think, how far this team has gone. I would not say that this is their would be their biggest one, but that doesn't diminish that it would absolutely be a very, very important win for them.
I agree that conference championship games are very important. I think winning at Wyoming against Josh Allen to win the conference championship
looks a lot better now.
Yeah, it was pretty good. It's hard to not say the Stanford game, maybe because I was there and maybe because I saw the people around me that had season tickets for 30, 40 years
right.
getting emotional,
completely,
seeing some tears.
Completely. And
that's when it hit me like, this is a freaking big deal.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of on the road, 21-point underdog, 14th ranked team in the country, I think this would be, if they win this game, I think this would be the biggest win. I'd go out on the limb and say that.
Oh, wow. All right.
But
well, like I said,
obviously they've
anybody who's older than 45 years old, go ahead and call Andre up and let him know that when Bobby Bowden and Florida State came in, high-ranked team, expected to blow San Diego State out, and they didn't.
But what was the spread in that game?
I think honestly, bro, it was before they invented paper money. So I don't think that they had spreads at that time. But I mean, Bobby Bowden's comments about that game are pretty awesome. But no, it definitely would be one of the major victories, and I think really, really important. Like I said, anybody wants to say that's fine. I just I can think of, a handful, right? I can only think of a handful where that you could definitely say would be better.
All right, that's going to do it for us. Hopefully you guys are excited about this coming game. We'd love to hear your thoughts about whether this would be the biggest victory in San Diego State history. Comment on either our YouTube channel when this episode posts or on Twitter. I'll be in Salt Lake City, so if you're traveling as well, hit me up on Twitter. I'll be out and about in downtown Salt Lake City Friday and probably early Saturday, so hit me up. Thanks again for listening. Make sure to subscribe, like, share, all of the above, and we'll talk to you guys next time. You are listening to the SDSU Football Podcast, presented by the East Village Times, with your hosts Andre Hagverdian and Paul Garrison.